Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Community Connection, a true community connection. And I'm going to let my best friend, Dr. Worster, introduce this guest because this is his connection. I've got a connection too. I'm going to let Eric start, and then I'll share my connections with none other than Dr. Gregory C. Hutchings. Go ahead, Dr. Worster.
So I am so proud to have my former colleague Greg on this program. I'm going to show everybody. I found a yearbook down here, and you can see before he was doctor, we just have Mr. Hutchings back there. Can you see that? Is that coming in any clear?
I'll do some AI editing on that to make it really, really pop.
That looks pretty good. Look at that guy.
I see it. I
So
love it.
Greg and I were young teachers together at Pennington, and Greg, I think I said this to you when I saw you. Greg is like why I'm here on this screen. Greg is why you know me, Nathaniel.
Wow. Very
If
good.
not for Greg, my life would be completely different. So, Greg, thank you for altering the course of my life.
That's a bold statement.
I
Gee
know. I'm like,
whiz.
shoot, when he told me that when I saw him, I was like, what?
And it just goes to show you never know the power of a conversation. So I met Greg when, like I said, we were both young teachers. We were at a traditional 1 to 8 school. And I was, 22, 23. I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. I knew I wanted to make more money than what I was doing. I was a special educator. I knew I wanted to make some more money than what I was doing. So I was thinking about getting a master's, but I'm a dumb kid. I don't know what to get a master's in. And Greg said you should get a master's in education leadership.
Hmm.
I think you were going through a program at the time, Greg.
Yep, at George Mason. Yeah.
George
There you
Mason,
go.
right? Where I ended up going to. And at that time, I didn't think I had any need for that because I didn't want to be an admin, had no desire to go down that pathway. But I think what you said to me then, Greg, was getting that master's degree will open up future possibilities. So whether or not you use it, it creates something that you could pursue. And I went for that master's at George Mason, just like my friend Greg, and got that. And then because of that, I found opportunities as an admin. And as you know, Nathaniel, and maybe you know Greg, I got to open up a school, a Title I elementary school as their first AP. I got to open up the only K-8 school in my county as their first principal. So I had some unique life-changing experiences that I am so thankful I had. And you are a big part of the reason why those opportunities existed in the first place. So Dr. Gregory Hutchings, thank you so much, my friend.
Oh,
Look at
thank
that. Look
you.
at that impact that we have on
Yeah,
people.
full
My gosh.
circle. Full circle. So thank
Full
you,
circle.
Eric. I
Yeah.
appreciate it.
I um I met you when you were the superintendent of Alexandria City Schools. Is that
That's
correct?
right.
Alexandria City Schools.
Yeah.
And we were sharing time. We were sharing a board table at George Mason, both of our alma maters, where we
Yes.
were trying to I guess help their educational leadership program.
Yeah.
I
It
don't know
was
if I
like
don't know
your
if we did
vision,
anything. I don't know if we did
giving them
anything.
insight.
Yeah, yeah. But I was like, this is a smart cat over here, man. This guy knows his stuff. So I had a little bit of imposter syndrome sitting at that table, but I was like, oh, I don't know. I'll share what I got to share. If they want to invite me back, they'll invite me back. But I was just honored to be sharing space with some of those great leaders, man. So that was cool stuff. That was really, really
Yeah.
cool stuff. So Dr. Hutchins, we are a sucker for an origin story. Dr. Worcester already kind of like gave us a little bit of a foundation, but just kind of like fill in your story a little bit. How you were a teacher at Pennington, superintendent, all this really great stuff. Now you've got your own company, all kinds of good stuff, man. So tell us your origin story, my man.
Yes, which is great. And this is the crazy thing. We were only together for 1 year at Pennington.
Wow. Okay.
I was only stayed there for 1 year, and I left um, and went to Benton Middle School because I did not like teaching English.
Mm,
And
wow.
at Pennington, you had to teach a content area and also one period of English. Everybody had to teach one period of English, and I hated that.
Oh.
'Cause I'm a science math teacher, so I was like, ah. But I love the Pennington experience. And plus, we went through so much. That was when 9/11 happened. We had students whose
Mm,
parents were impacted by that. So that was a very memorable year. So if you can send me a snapshot of our yearbook, that would be great.
Will do.
Um, but to give you some background to me, like I honestly, I was not the person who said I'm going to be a teacher one day. That was not me. I didn't grow up thinking this was going to be my profession.
mm,
And it was a woman named Joyce Sigmundson from Prince William County. She was the principal at River Oaks Elementary School at the time.
mm.
This was in the spring of like 2000. So about, sometime in May or April or May or something like that. And I used to be an admissions counselor for Old Dominion University. I was the Northern Virginia representative, and she was looking at ODU for her son. And she told me that I would be a great teacher. And here's her business card.
Mm,
And whenever I'm looking to change my profession, give her a call because she believes that I have a calling for teaching. So, Eric, for you to tell me kind of like what I gave you in regards to advice, Joyce Sigmundson, she told me, and a few months later, I sent her just a email or something,
mm,
and she was like, and it was like October now of 2000, and she was like, I have a position that's open like right now. Can you come in tomorrow to interview? And I was like, I was just checking in with you, when I came in,
Wow.
and she hired me literally on the spot. I hadn't even finished all my paperwork for Prince
that's
William,
crazy. That's awesome.
so, and I didn't have a classroom yet or anything, so I had to take time to get a classroom. But that was when I realized, when I stood in front of that fifth grade classroom with, like 25 students, I realized the power of teaching, and I knew I wanted to be a part of this profession. Like that was my moment to
Mm,
say, okay, this is my career. This is what I'm going to do. And making it to Pennington and Benton. And my challenge was, when I was in Prince William County, we had to go through a lot of hoops to become an administrator.
yeah,
You had to
true.
get on the principal list, and so I did all that, and I would always make it to be a finalist. Like I want to say, and I can't remember the total number of interviews I did before I became an AP, but I
Mm,
want to say it had to be at least 10. And
yeah.
I was always number two, right?
Mm.
And they would say, "You're so young." I mean, I was 24 at the time.
So
I had
why
only
even
been
let you
teaching.
bother going through the hoops,
I
you
know I
know?
only been teaching for like 4 years.
Yeah.
It was just like, you need more experience, that type of thing.
Mm,
And I still remember I said, well, I'm going to just send my resume out, and I applied to Chesterfield County, and it changed my life because I literally got hired by Miss Freyer, Sarah Freyer at Fallen Creek Middle School. She
mm,
hired me, and that changed my life because that was when I met Dr. Billy K. Kennedy, who was the first Black superintendent in Chesterfield and also the first Black state superintendent for Virginia,
mm.
who became my mentor. God rest his soul, he passed away earlier this year.
Mm.
But he has been such an impactful person in my life, and that set me on a trajectory into the principalship in Nashville. And then I became principal of the year when I was in Nashville, which was
Wow.
crazy,
I remember
right?
that.
In middle school principal of the year. Then I came to Alexandria as a director because in my interview as principal of the year, they said, "Well, where do you see yourself in 10 years?" And I said, "I see myself as the superintendent of Alexandria City Public Schools."
That's right.
Right. So that was like set in stone when I was a principal. And the superintendent called me, right? I didn't know him, Mort Sherman. He calls
Mm.
me out of the blue, and he said, "Hey, I read this article about you saying you want to be the superintendent, and I'm the superintendent of Alexandria, so you
Wow.
want my job?" And I was like, "Yeah, I do. I don't want it today, but I do want
Yeah.
your job." He was like, "Well, you just got so much ambition. Why don't you come up here and work with us in Alexandria? Come back home." And it took me time. It was about 6 months later before I finally said yes
Mm,
and came to Alexandria because I had to leave, my job. But that just kind of like set me on that trajectory in Alexandria as a director. And then, I go to Shaker Heights as a superintendent, first time superintendent, at 35 years old.
mm,
And, this place that I read about during graduate school that was always about, equity work and things of that nature. So I was honored to get that opportunity as the first Black superintendent there, to make some real, I think, revolutionary and radical changes, in being my unapologetic self, which led me back to my hometown of Alexandria. So,
mm.
it was like full circle, as I just shared this quickly with you
Yeah.
all. But it was definitely full circle, a moment to get back into the place that raised me from kindergarten through 12th grade.
Wow.
So it was cool to be able to now come back
That's
as a
very cool.
superintendent there.
And tell us about where we like all your work now, because you've got a very, very interesting thing because you don't have the public school stuff anymore, right? You're
Yeah.
a little bit
So
more broad than that, right?
I am. So I still work with public schools, but now I work with public schools as a consultant. So when I was during the pandemic, as you all know, that was when so much was happening. And the country was at a crossroads when it came to racial equity. And I decided I wanted to write this book during the pandemic as I'm leading a school district and stressed out and trying to be like a medical doctor
Mm,
is what I felt like at that
yeah,
time,
sure.
not like a doctor of education. Um, and I wrote this book called Getting Into Good Trouble at School, and it was a guide to building an anti-racist school system. After George Floyd was murdered, I realized that I needed to do more in this country. And being a superintendent was one of the best jobs that I had. And that was, and doing it for, almost a decade was pretty amazing. I wasn't fired. I'm black in America in
Sure.
doing that role. So I thought I had a really good tenure, but I knew that I was going to have to really spread my wings. And if I'm going to do this equity work and this anti-racism work, I was not going to be able to accomplish the goals that I've set, pigeonholed in one district.
Sure.
So I made the move, right? Which was really hard for me because that was my hometown. I just signed
Mm,
another contract to stay with Alexandria. We were doing really well. Everyone was back in the schools from the pandemic. We had the highest graduation rate. All of our schools were accredited at the time,
mm,
which they hadn't been in 20 years. So there was just a lot of good things happening. And I made this decision, okay, I'm now going to start my own business. And Revolutionary Ed was launched where the focus was on anti-racism across America in regards to public education. And it was all aligned with the principles from the book, Getting into Good
mhm,
Trouble, which I have a co-author, Doug Reed. And I also knew that as I was transitioning into, now being a business owner
mm,
and a solopreneur at that time, I realized that I also want to work in the higher ed space because if if we're going to make significant impact, we need to make sure folks have the foundation to be able to go into these workspaces and to go into post-pandemic America, right? And I said, well, let me take the experiences that I've had, not just my lived experiences, but also throughout my career, and invest them into this next generation, right?
mhm.
And that led me to Howard University, where now I'm an assistant professor and also
Oh, right
the
on.
EDD coordinator for our doctor of education program. So I'm now putting all of my talk that I go around this country to do. I'm putting the work in regards to that too, and making sure now I'm setting those foundational pieces and trying to use all of my expertise to help this next generation.
It's fascinating. Dr. Worster?
Greg, I'd love to hear more about just the ambition that you had and where that came from, because you mentioned you were a principal young, you were a superintendent young. What propelled you to move forward so quickly through the education hierarchy?
Yeah. The crazy thing is that so throughout my life, I've always been ambitious. I mean,
Yeah.
it just happened to now go into that education path. But like even when I was in kindergarten, like I still talk to my kindergarten teacher, Miss McKenzie, right? She was a first year teacher when she was my kindergarten teacher. So we're not that far apart. I don't know, we're like
Yeah.
22 years apart, something like
Yeah.
that. And she reminds me that I said I was going to be the first black president of the United States before there was a Barack Obama, right? We're talking about in 1982. A 5-year-old is saying he's going to be the first black president of
That's
the
awesome.
United States of America.
I wanted
So
to
I
be a I
feel
wanted to
like,
be a transformer. I want
yeah, and I'm like, I want to be the president of the United States, first black president, right? And I don't want that job now. I think I could do it,
you could
honestly. I
do
do
it.
think I could do a better job, but
That's right.
I don't want to do that job right now. But I was saying that to say um, I have been really ambitious early on. But what stuck with me was it's kind of like when I got into teaching, I felt like I wanted bigger impact. So I needed to be an assistant principal. I
Mhm.
became an assistant principal. I felt like I was doing too much on just discipline. And I wanted to be more of an instructional leader and have more impact. So I became a principal. When I became a principal, I wanted to have a bigger impact on instruction. So I became a director. And then I'm like, I want to have a bigger impact on policy and help all kids. So I became a superintendent. So I think that trajectory happened because when I made it to one level or one particular goal, I was always eager to do more and to have more impact. So that just led me to get a higher position. Every move that I've had has been to have more impact, not always just about me and my career. It was like, how can I touch more people? And that's how my trajectory was.
Let me
Love it.
ask
Well, love
that,
it.
Daniel.
What's that?
I think just every job that you're talking about, it's so time consuming. and
Yeah.
it takes up so much of your life. I know for me as a principal, I did it 10 years and it seemed like a very long time. Great time, but it felt like that was the entirety of my life. How have you, or have you, balanced your life, your personal
Mm.
life, with your very busy work life?
Mm,
Yeah, I wish earlier on in my life, in my career, I would have been more mindful of the balance because, and luckily, my wife and I were still married after 23 years, right? So she's
Congratulations.
been through all of these transitions. She was my fiance when I was at Pennington,
mm,
so and then she became my wife. But I had to be really selfish. And I'm able to admit that now after,
mhm.
counseling and owning my truth and that type of thing. But it did require me to be extremely selfish in order to become a superintendent at 35 years old. And to move my family into so many different states and places, which was a significant impact, on our family and my wife and her job and her career.
Yeah.
She had to leave jobs that she loved if I left for a job that I wanted to do, right? And we had to leave communities and homes, which is the crazy thing is like this was our eighth move, right? Where we are now. And we've been married for 23 years. So on average, we move every 3 years.
Mm,
So it was significant in regards to being extremely selfish in order to reach those things. Where I saw my transition and balance was before I became a superintendent, because when I went to be a principal in Nashville was when my wife and I we had the most challenge because it was
mm,
something she did not want to do. She didn't say that she didn't want to do it at the time, but she went along with it, and we had a lot of marital issues,
mm.
right? And what I learned from that, and that was early on in our marriage too. So what I learned from that was that we have to kind of be team players in the decision making. So when I became superintendent, one of the agreements that we had was I have to still be present for family, and it has to be a priority before I take the job. So, that means if we have parent teacher conferences, if you can go to everybody else's stuff, you better make sure you make it to our kids.
Yeah.
If I call you, you need to answer the phone. If you can't pick up, text me back. We need to see each other. We need to be able to still have dinner at least 2 to 3 times a week as a family at home. So these were some non-negotiables that, my wife set. So luckily, when I went into my interview, or not my interview, but my negotiations when I got the job, I said, well, I have a family and I got to be a family man and I need to
Yeah.
be able, and I said all those things up front. So I didn't have to like go down this path of work, 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 and then try to, backpedal.
Yeah.
I was able to say it up front. Now, I'm a workaholic just by
Yeah.
nature anyway. So I still work 17 hours a day, I mean, because I had to show up, and I can't always say that I was in tune and paying attention, but at least I was there. Like,
At
I
least you
mean,
were
I still
there.
remember times I was clapping, but my child wasn't out there. I was like, oh, they're not there. Oops, I was clapping for your son. Good job.
Good
Good
job,
job.
baby. Good job.
Good job for you. But my wife was
Uh,
like, you're not even paying attention because I'm clapping, like, yes. And they didn't score. That was the other team.
It's hard.
So
It's like if in order for leaders to be exceedingly unselfish and help so many people that we don't know, there's a paradox that we have to be selfish.
yeah.
And it's very, very challenging. It's very, very challenging. It sounds like you've got a tremendous life partner, man, that's really keeping you in check and helping and holding you accountable for that. But it is, in order to be unselfish, we have to be selfish. It's
Yeah.
challenging.
You have to, but you also got to realize within yourself that you're being selfish, right?
Yes.
So if you are, at least you can apologize for it and be
Yeah.
like, I apologize for doing X, Y, and Z versus saying, what are you talking about? And
Yeah.
gaslighting somebody.
Exactly.
I was
Exactly.
able to be open and honest that I was being selfish for the
Yeah.
things that I wanted to have. And I think something that seemed really ambitious and attractive to my wife before we were married also became the biggest nemesis
Mm.
in our relationship, and still continues to be a challenge because I am someone who continuously wants to do better and to do more. And I can't help that. Like, I don't know how to turn that switch off. I don't know how to make myself, how to dim my own light. I don't know how to do that. So
Yeah.
my thing is what you see is what you get. I try to be authentic, and you love me or you don't, and
Yeah.
I'm fine with that. If you don't, I have feelings too, so I'm not like somebody who's like, I don't care. I'm like, they don't like me.
Sure, of course.
I do
I
feel
love it.
something, but I move on. I get over it.
That's fascinating. Well, I want to dig into your passion. I mean, you're going to schools, going to school districts, counseling people, working with leaders on these very these huge issues. You talked about equity. You're talking about anti-racist school systems. I mean, these are big, 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 big issues. If you were to work with an audience of principals right now, say you're on a stage, you got an audience of principals, what are three things, Dr. Hutchins, that you would want them to know about this work when it comes to equity, when it comes to anti-racist policies? Because you're going to have some people in the audience that's like, what do you mean? I'm not this. Why are we even talking about this? Some people that will do this and close their, how do you what are three things that you would talk to a whole range of principals just to start the conversation about this work?
Yeah, before I even hit on anti-racism,
Sure.
I would talk about, and I love you at this question because I talk about VIP.
Mm,
Vision, integrity, passion is where I start, right? Because the visionary piece, how are you going to be able to see beyond your moment right now? If this is all you can see is today, then you're not visionary. So you're never going to be able to do any anti-racism work. Honestly, you're never going to be able to change children's lives if all you can see them is for who they are today. Because some kids are coming from some horrible situations. So is that going to define it tomorrow? If you can't see it better tomorrow, how are you going to help them, right? So you
yeah.
got to be visionary. So that I would start with visionary. The second piece would be integrity, because if you don't show up and do what you say you're going to do, right? That's an issue, right? And it may not happen tomorrow. And this is why, even with my goals, I try not now to put dates on them. I say I
Mm,
want to accomplish something, but I don't say by 35 anymore, like I
right.
used to do, because then I
Right.
feel desperate, like, oh my God, I got to get it done, right? But you got to have that integrity, regardless of how long it may take, that you show up and you do what you said you're going to do. And you got to have some core values, or you truly will fall for anything. So if you don't know who you are as a person, how are you going to help anybody else?
Mm,
And then the final thing is regarding passion, right? And I say passion in this particular work is so important because it's thankless sometimes in education. It is overwhelming at times. And if you don't have some form of passion, how are you going to get up when nobody's really cheerleading and happy for you, right? When nobody's saying, "Oh, you did such a great job," or "We love you so much." How are you going to still be able to get back, on the horse and get the work done? So that passion piece, I think, is going to be key. So to have vision, integrity, and passion, is what's going to lead you to doing the anti-racism, work.
mm,
And, I also wholeheartedly believe in meeting people where they are, not necessarily where we want them to be. And that's how I define equity, not only in the book, but also just in my professional life. So the same, if I was in a group of principals, I would be trying to meet them where they are, not where I want them to be, by talking about vision, integrity, and passion before we start talking about what you think about race, right?
hmm.
And what do you think about academic disparities? Let's first work on your core, before we even get to that, to that topic.
Fascinating. Well, we'll keep diving into that. Dr. Worcester?
Let me ask you about vision, since that was the first word in the
Yeah.
VIP. If you could, if it were possible, 5 years from now, if anything is possible, there's no barriers, no obstacles, how would schools look different in your ideal state in 5 years? What would you
In
see?
5 years,
Yeah.
we would get rid of grades,
Oh,
for
that's a good
one.
one. That's a good one. That's a
Like, we
good
would
one.
get rid of grades, and we would really stop trying to pigeonhole students into just two pathways, right? Either you're going to go to school or you're going to go to some kind of certification, right? I think we should really be looking at what is it that interests you, and how can we build off of that first? Because if you meet people where their interests are, all the types of jobs will come up later, right? I don't have to give you just two paths. Let me focus on your interests. Let me focus on what makes you happy. And I think that would truly make this world a totally different place if we all did things that were happy. And a lot of folks, they say they don't know what that feels like. Well, I do. Like, my wife and I, we have this conversation all the time. She's like, "Well, you've always been happy with every job." I've always been happy with every job that I have. I've
That's
never
awesome.
been like, now there are aspects of jobs I don't like,
Sure. Sure.
But I have always been happy. In the moment I don't like it, then I leave. I don't stay in something I don't want to do. But that's just how I am, you know. But everybody doesn't live their life that way, right? So I sometimes have to realize that's not everybody's lived experience, but that's mine. Imagine if every student could have that kind of experience where you get to do what you like and let's build from that, right? So that's one thing. So
Mm.
grades, building from that. And you said how many things do I need to
I
You
don't know.
didn't give Nathaniel gives numbers. I just said, what's your ideal state?
Oh,
What?
okay, got it. Well, I think those are the
Okay.
two top things. And I also think that we need to get out of this whole space of thinking that students have to be in a classroom in rows with the teacher or an adult talking in the front of the room. Like I just feel like I'm bored in that environment. So I made it through because I had to, but I was always bored in school.
Yeah.
And I felt like I was like trapped. So,
Mm.
and so some other students may feel that way too. So I feel like we need to have more of a hybrid approach to schooling where some students might do it one way and some students might do it another way. So you have some options
Yep.
versus, this is just the way, to do it. And we just got to get out of that. And people aren't embracing AI right now. And in 5 years, AI is going to be even bigger than it is right now. Folks are so intimidated by it. And I'm always saying, how can we not embrace it? And especially in some of our predominantly Black and Brown communities that are low income, those students are not receiving the training to learn how to use the AI, which means 20 years from now, when it's time for them to get jobs, they're not going to have any kind of interaction and access. So there's going to be a huge barrier when it comes to employment, right? So AI is another area that we need to incorporate and embrace versus saying it's bad, it's not good. Let's remove phones from classrooms and all. Like everybody else has their phone every second of the day. Let's
Yeah.
look how hard it is to take adults phones.
Yeah, I know. It's very hard.
I think the challenge that I see with AI, and I saw the same challenge with technology. We weren't always one to one where we work, and I think the hope was that when we moved to one, things would somehow magically shift, and we would know how to use technology. But we've always been so slow in
Mhm.
instructing our educators in how to use technology effectively. So it's not that AI isn't out there. It's not that it's not a great tool. It's how do we help our educators who I think struggled with incorporating old like laptop technology into education effectively. How in the world are they supposed to incorporate AI effectively? Dr. Hutchings, make it happen.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think we need to just do some professional learning to show people how to, if we even with our staff right now, like I'm working one of my consulting, I say I have a couple of consulting partners. One is Varsity Tutors who does like tutoring,
Mm.
and it's virtual tutoring. And then another is Your Way Learning, which is really exciting because they do work where they take AI to help you with your IEPs, with your lesson planning, with creating customized formative assessments for your students based on their ability level, right? So just imagine if we can start introducing these things to our educators so they can see how precious it is in their lives, how they reclaim their time that they
Yes.
have lost, in so many ways, and how you can now reclaim it and you can now do something different. So you might be able to go home and have dinner with your family tonight, right? Because you're not sitting and doing your lesson plan until 6 o'clock and then
Yeah.
driving home, right? So, I think if we can start introducing AI to the educators and for them to see the benefits of it, they'll believe that it can also help our students because the students are already using it
They're
anyway.
already using it. They're already
They're
using it.
already ahead of the game as they always are. Think about our generation when, I still remember the long lines we had for the computer lab in college when it was the first computer lab. We would wait just to get on AOL, like
That's
wait
right.
in line for hours, right? We were ahead of our parents.
Yeah.
Same thing with this generation. They're ahead on AI. They're ahead on how to do coding and all these things and complications that we have with technology. We are the intimidated ones, the adults. So
Yeah.
we're now holding back that next generation because we're intimidated.
I have a son who's a junior in high school. I've got a daughter who's a seventh grader in middle school or junior high, or middle school, whatever you call it. And and our old district is a no phone in schools now district.
Mhm.
And I have mixed feelings
Look at
about it.
this. The whole technology and social media and AI has already left. It would be different if we were trying to implement it.
Sure.
The train has already left the station and it's on a bullet train. So it's going tremendously fast. So it's difficult to stop that something that's already started, right? And I think that's the issue. I think, like you said, we should be helping students learn how to manage
Mhm.
technology, not ban. Anything that you literally take away, it always becomes something you want.
Exactly.
So we just doing the opposite. When you say you can't eat candy in school,
I
everybody
give
wants to sneak candy in school.
give
You
me my
say you can
Twix.
chew gum, everybody you say you can't chew gum, everybody wants to chew gum. As soon as you let them chew it, they learn how to manage it, right?
Exactly.
So why not teach folks how to manage the technology in schools? I was not a proponent of that, and I'm glad that I'm not in the superintendent role right now because I would be pushing back saying, why are we doing this? The
Hmm.
same way I was doing it with all the other kind of like petitions and pleas to get rid of technology. I would always say in our staff meetings with the leadership, all right, well, you all put your cell phones in the basket before we come in here.
Yeah.
And nobody's like, oh, but I'm gonna get my text. I gotta look at my email, like so why teach them how to use their technology versus saying
Yeah.
no.
And I think about what private schools are doing right now. I think about like those elite private schools. They're probably teaching kids how to do all this and
That's
navigate
right,
all
how
this
to
stuff,
balance
right?
life. They're
Yeah.
teaching them how to balance.
Balance. That's
How
interesting.
do you balance? How do you do self-care? How do you make sure you learn how to put your phones away? Like I even think like our daughter, she's a junior in college. Our son's a junior in high school
Hmm.
too. Now he knows how to put his cell phone away, thankfully,
Yeah.
but he's on it all day at home, right? But he knows how to put it away. So I can't have it out in school. And our daughter, she in college, she says, well, sometimes I need a cell phone break or I need, and she does this on her own, right? She's 20, so I can't
Yeah.
tell her what to do anymore.
Yeah.
Well, I still pay her bills, but I can't tell her what to do because she's like, Dad, I'm about to go back to school. But she takes Instagram breaks and she takes, TikTok breaks where she's off for 3 weeks or, like so she's which I didn't teach her that by the
Oh,
way.
good.
So
Some good
I
stuff.
wish I could take some of her advice on some of the things.
I agree.
But I just feel like the point that I'm making is that let's teach them how to manage. Let's not ban
Yeah.
because you're banning something that's already there.
I gotta get into anti-racist work, man. All right,
That's
so
right.
that's right. So here's the question. So we talked about that room full of principles, and I'm a sucker for an acronym, man. VIP. I'm all about that. I'm over here thinking about my vision and my things that are integral to me and my passion. Um, so let's say we got that norm. We're meeting principles where they are. You've got that magic wand, you right? You've got that platform. What do school leaders need to know about anti-racist school policy systems, things that maybe we're just going in motion and we don't
Right.
even know about? What are your thoughts?
Yeah. So the first thing you got to know your history, right? And this is something that I think is so important and key when I work with different school districts. I always say when you begin to unpack your history, it will reveal why you have some of the challenges you have today,
Mm,
right? Whether it is redlining that it might have happened in your city, whether it is segregated schools, the haves and the have-nots. All once you dig deeper into that history, it will help you understand, okay, well, this is why we are where we are now, right? And then once you kind of get to why we're here, you now have to commit to racial equity, right? And it is not just about equity, because I define equity as meeting people where they are, not necessarily where we want them to
mm,
be. But when you're talking about racial equity, you're going to have to really determine like where are the different races in our community and when it comes to our schools, what do our academic disparities look like, and making a commitment that it's not okay, right? And we can't put it on the student. We can't say, well, because the student came from this particular neighborhood or has this kind of parents or doesn't have parents at all, this is why they are X, Y, or Z, right?
mhm,
Because it's not a student problem, it's a system problem. So how can we kind of dismantle that system? And then I also think it's important to look at the de facto segregation that happens in your schools. And a lot of that is from honors courses, AP classes, some gatekeeping sometimes that happens. You got to have
mm,
certain scores to get in this particular pathway, or you got to have this kind of counselor to be able to do X, Y, or Z. But really removing those barriers and introducing students to these paths earlier, right? I used to argue a lot with superintendents, some of my superintendent colleagues, who would say, we opened the floodgates for AP, and now we went from 5% to now 50%, and it's been a
wow.
year. And I'm like, okay, well, now let's go. That's when you give those students the test. How many students got a zero?
Mm,
Right? Right. So how good is that? because and
Exactly.
they're like, well, it's better for a kid to fail an AP exam than, and I'm like, failing is failing. How do you think the student feels when I failed and my student next to me got a 3, 4, or 5 and they're getting credit to go to college and I
Mm,
can't do anything with this course? Right. So, what about the psyche behind that? So, I would argue with them and say, why not take the 5 years to get them prepared for AP? So, you're not just throwing them in there in ninth grade. Let's start doing summer programs in fifth grade.
mm,
Let's start making sure that they're getting access and getting introduced to the type of rigor that AP and IB require, right? So that then they can actually come in and show up and be successful and have confidence. And I feel like their bubble was burst. I'm in this class, but you feel I don't deserve to be in here. And then the teacher sees that they have 0 or 1,
mm,
and the other kids have 4 or 5s, and they treat you that way too. Right. So
mm,
they make you feel like you don't deserve to be there. And they say, see, look at the kids. They don't need to be here. So I feel like it was a disservice, especially to our black and brown students. The fourth thing I think is important to look at strategic thinking and strategic planning,
mhm,
right? And a lot of times, folks, we talk about strategic plans where it's your roadmap to success. Well, how do you navigate that? It makes you a strategic thinker. So, right, I need to be able to anticipate certain barriers that might come my way. And how am I going to pivot? And what is that going to look like? Or who can I bring on my team to help me with X, Y, or Z, right? That is what strategic thinking is all about. So, you got to have both strategic thinking and strategic planning. And then you have to make sure that you're looking at the policing that's happening in our schools,
mm,
right? And it's beyond just the zero tolerance policies that some schools still have, unbelievably, right?
mhm,
But many schools districts still have zero tolerance. And the thing is, but I think we need to look at our policing in a different way. Students are acting out for a reason.
yeah.
You know,
Behavior is a
behavior or issues,
communication.
or
Yeah.
there's something going. So it's kind of like, so I was looking at some research, and you have more school divisions in across this country. They have more police officers than they do counselors and psychologists and social workers.
Wow. Wow.
Some schools have an SRO with no social worker or psychologist,
Yes, I agree. Hey, just
right?
listen, you worked in Tennessee, right? You worked in Nashville,
Yeah, I
Tennessee.
worked
Yeah,
in Nashville.
I hear you. I
Yeah, it's
got
a
you.
prime example. So, and that's an urban district, but we're putting police in the buildings where students actually need social supports. They need emotional support. They need to understand, how do I navigate this world if every day I'm at home somebody is mentally or physically or sexually abusing me and
Yeah,
I'm going back to school
yeah, yeah.
as if
You know,
nothing has happened,
I
right? How
feel
do we
so.
provide those supports for folks?
I agree. I feel so bad for our teachers who have to do everything but teach. Often we think about a brand new teacher who just came out of university and they got to teach a very diverse group of students. Maybe it's different sections, and that in and of itself is a tremendous challenge. Then they may be asked to do more SEL work on top of that. And it's
Mhm.
like, with very little professional school counselors or social workers, just like you're asking, and everything is dumped on that teacher. And then we're talking about, well, we want to hold them accountable for higher grades, but we also want them to build relationships. And yes, we want to build relationships, but we got to do all this stuff. Oh, and then by the way, do these 32 other mandated programs that are put on your plate too. And then the plates, they can't spin all these plates over time. And I love what you're saying, because I have been in schools where there are more SROs than there are professional school counselors, or there's one that is on a rotating basis. And so the poor teacher who wasn't trained to be a social worker, who wasn't
Mhm.
trained to be a therapist, who wasn't trained to be a counselor, has to do the jobs
Has to
that
do
they're
that
not
work.
suited to
Yeah,
be.
yeah.
That's not equity for me.
And it's not
That's
equity, but it is a
insanity.
part. Yeah, but it also, and so now get me, I agree with
I
you a hundred
got you.
percent, right? And I also believe a part of education is sometimes it's all hands on deck, right?
Sure.
Because if we don't do it, who will? So I do believe we got to advocate though. So I'm not saying we should dump all this. So educators out there who are hearing me speak, I'm not saying that you deserve to have all this work. So please know I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is that if our school that we have chosen to be a part of to help students, right? If there's a particular need that the school is not providing, as an educator, sometimes we do have to step in. Is it fair? No, it's not.
Mhm.
It's not fair, and it's not just. But a part of us being educators is us being selfless people, right? That is a part of education. But I do believe that schools and school systems need to start investing in social workers
I agree.
and psychologists. And I also believe that our teacher preparation programs need to also make sure that our teachers are equipped to handle what is coming their way. And I feel that we do a huge disservice. I saw them when, as a superintendent, when we were hiring teachers and how they come in, and I mean, they don't know a dang on thing.
Yeah, they don't know. They
I'm
don't.
like, what?
They don't
Where did
ever.
they just come here from high school because they know nothing? They don't know pedagogy. They don't know social emotional learning. And these are from some very uh, you know, well
Sure.
known colleges and universities.
Could
And
be
I'm
from
thinking,
George
wow,
Mason. I'm just saying. Could be from George Mason. You
good.
never
I haven't
know.
seen any from George
Oh,
Mason,
that's
but
good. Me. That's good. That's good.
but I know some schools they were coming from, and so I feel we need to make sure that our teacher education programs and our principal education programs have components on SEL, and we don't. And they don't, some schools don't even talk about, inequities, right? And how to address accessibility for students. Like these are things that should be taught. And now that we have this whole AI, coming
Yeah.
at us like crazy, we need to make sure that we're also training them on AI,
Yeah.
training them on technology. How do you incorporate it into your lessons? How do you use it to reclaim your time? Like if we can just revamp our educational systems, not just K-12, but also our teacher preparation and leader preparation programs, it's going to make a huge difference because folks are coming in with the same training that we got, and it shouldn't be. That
Yeah.
was 25 years ago.
Yeah.
Mhm.
They can write a damn good lesson plan. Boy, I tell you what,
If they don't know how to implement, we could
because,
talk all day.
but I'll tell you, we don't talk
One last,
about this, Dr.
one,
Hutchins.
one last quick one,
We
Nathaniel. What
don't.
you got?
Well, this I'm going to share a story, right? And
All right.
so I was I'm going to make it as quick as possible. I was on an airplane flying to California, flying to Los Angeles last week, and I like to talk to people on the plane, right? I'm just that person. If so, I just ingratiate myself because my ADHD kicks in and I have no filter. And so there was a beautiful woman sitting next to me, a little bit older than I was, definitely a Muslim woman. Okay, she had the traditional scarf on, and we were just kind of talking about some things. And I noticed that she was in HR. And so I was talking to her. I was like, "Oh, you're in human resources." She was like,
You
"Yes,
were looking
absolutely,
over her shoulder, reading her emails.
absolutely." Because we were that's hey, we were she was right in the middle. What are you going to do? So I didn't want to spend 5 hours not talking to this wonderful human being. And so I'm chatting with her, and I'm like, "So you're in HR?" And she's like, "Yeah, yeah, HR." I was like, "Oh, tell me about what you do." And she said she's the DEI director for her company. I was like, this is fascinating because DEI is in the news. There's a lot of takes on this kind of conversation. And I asked her, I said, well, in your company, what does diversity mean for you? And she kind of gave her explanation that she's looking for different types of folks to fill the ranks. And I said, yes, but the certain corporation was an Islamic corporation. And
Hmm.
I said, well, do you hire people of different faiths? Do you hire Christians? Do you hire Jews? Do you hire Hindus? Do you hire Buddhists? Do you hire non-believers? And she said, of course not. And then I said, well, then that's not very diverse, is it? So anyway, we got a chuckle. We actually got a chuckle from this, but it kind of sparked a conversation about, and this is my quick question, as school leaders, what does diversity mean? Does it mean diversity of thought? Does it mean diversity of race? Does it mean diversity of opinion? How would you answer that question as quickly as possible, right, Dr. Worcester? So yeah, because
Yeah.
it's a big question.
I think it's going to vary. It's going to really depend on your district, right? There isn't a universal definition of diversity, and this is why, as when I do DEIA training, I always share you got to have definitions for these terms
Mm,
because my interpretation and my definition may not be the same as yours. So we need to make sure that we're all speaking from the same word and definition.
yeah.
And this is how we have to collectively agree upon, right? Which also will help you with the people that you hire. Because if they don't come in with that same philosophy, it's not going to be a good fit, for them, right? But you need
Mm,
to make sure you're defining that up front. So I think it does depend on the community that you are working with in order to define diversity. I don't think there's a universal definition.
Yeah.
But one thing that I will say, especially now that folks, don't want us using the term
Mm,
diversity, equity, inclusion, or
sure.
anti-racism, I'm telling folks now that action speaks louder than DEIA words.
Mm,
So, Black and brown people didn't create words like diversity, equity, inclusion, right? So I don't feel personal like that's my word, like because I didn't create that word. So you're
sure,
not
sure.
doing any harm to me by erasing that word. I don't care if you erase the word.
Mm,
However, I want to make sure that if we see academic disparities or we see, students of a particular group that are not getting their needs met, that we call it what it is and we do something about it. Because when you think about it, when we use terms like diversity, equity, inclusion, or anti-racism, it becomes a general statement and everything
mm,
is put into that, right? So now it's like the sky is the limit. I'm overwhelmed of what to do.
yeah.
So let's call the issue of our school or of our school system and let's fix that,
Mm,
right?
great,
Let's
great.
not lump it into one word. Let's call whatever the particular issue is, let's call it out and then let's come up with a solution. So because I believe in having problem investigators, but also having problem solvers.
Love it. Thanks for answering that. That was a big one.
Mhm.
I appreciate that. And
That was a big one.
that was a
All
big
right,
one.
here we go. Number one, looking back at the last 5 years in education, what gives you pause and what gives you hope?
What gives me pause is the pandemic. Gives me a lot of pause because
Mm,
but I'm also it made me hopeful because it took the entire world to go through a global pandemic in order for people to realize that there are deficits and gaps in public education.
mm,
It took for, the average or middle class white person to be impacted, for them to see something we've always seen, right? So because now your child from this upper white middle class family can't get the kindergarten teacher to teach them how to read because it's now virtual. Well, just think Black and brown kids from low income communities had gotten that when there wasn't a pandemic.
mm.
But now it's important to you. So it kind of shined a light, which was great, right? What brings me hope is this next generation of young people because um, they are a little more sensitive than we were,
Mm,
but I think that's in a good way because now they pay attention. For you to be sensitive, you have to be able to have emotional intelligence.
that's a great point. It's a great
So
point.
the simple fact that you're a little more sensitive is good. When you are like rough and tough and hard and we just do whatever we got to do and get burned on the merry-go-round on slides and all the things we had to go through growing up, it makes you kind of like inhuman in some
Yeah. A
ways
little tough.
because you lose some of your emotion and your caring spirit.
Yeah.
Whereas this next generation, they are caring. They care about what you want to be called. They care about, whether it's your pronouns or they care about, how you're treated. They care about rest. They care about if I don't like something that I leave, right? I'm going
Yeah.
to go do another job. I don't want to do that job. Or why does it have to be this way, right? So that brings me hope because they're going to challenge, our status quo and what we've always been accustomed to doing.
Great.
I have never heard in all of my time, Eric, doing this podcast, I have never heard somewhat an answer so understanding and empathetic of what you just gave, Dr. Hutchins, about the millennials. And I am writing that down and I'm going to steal that like with
Hey, we're
everything. Like
educators. We're supposed to.
good thieves are good educators, good pedagogicals are good thieves.
Greg, where can people find you to
Yeah.
connect with you or learn more about your work?
Oh, yes. Well, you can find me. So now I have two, and I want to make sure I'm highlighting both of my businesses. Revolutionary Ed does our at www.revolutionary-ed.com. Um, but we do work in regards to anti-racism education, and we do professional learning and coaching for that. Then I also have Hutchings and Associates, which can be found at www.drhutchings.com, and that's Hutchings. But we do executive coaching for principals, superintendents, strategic planning, and then also school board superintendent relations. And that's a
Ooh.
new service that we just started to offer because it is so important, for school boards to work hand in hand with superintendents. I think that's a whole nother podcast for us.
Great.
And then also you can find me on Howard University's website because I'm an assistant professor and the EDD coordinator for the Educational Leadership and Policy Studies Department at Howard, which is a dream come true for me.
Go,
Greg,
go, go Bisons,
Go
right?
Bison. That's
Go,
right.
go
Yes. Go
Bisons.
ahead.
Come on,
Nathaniel,
man. I know it. I know
too. Go
Howard
ahead. I love
University.
it.
I know
last
Howard
question.
University.
All
What
right.
word of inspiration do you have for our educators?
Keep going. I think my words of wisdom is that this is the most powerful profession in the world. And we don't always get the credit, but we get to actually see the kind of like the product of our hard work, right? And don't always judge it based on what the state of the country is right now, right? Because a lot of people who are doing those decisions, those educators are retired.
Mm,
So that's not us who produce the people who are making these decisions right now. But as we think about how this world continues to evolve, educators nurture that creativity. Educators help students find out who they are and what they want to do and what path they should go down. Educators provide them with the ability to go out and to get those different degrees that they have. Educators help the next generation of doctors and to find all these cures, right? To pique interest and excitement and compassion, right? And all these different feelings. So I just feel like just know that this is one of the best professions in the world, and sometimes we discredit our profession because of the negative
mm,
kind of experiences that we have, and sometimes how we are always discredited and treated unjustly. But don't allow that to define what we are truly about in the educational profession. People try to discredit us because we are so powerful.
mm, mm.
So remember your power. And once you embrace your power as an educator and you realize that you have been called to do this work because everyone cannot be an educator, it makes you look at everything that we do differently. And it truly makes you say, at the end of the day, it's all worth it.
It's all worth it. I love
Mhm.
it. All right, Dr. Worcester, any final questions, my man? What a wonderful community connection this was, man. All three of us
Community connection.
triangulate. Look at that, like a constellation of excellence. So, Dr.
Love it.
Gregory Hutchins, you are a freaking VIP, man. I love your vision. I love how integral your integrity that you have with your calling. And man, you got some passion. Keep it going, man. Thank you very much. Thanks for answering all those hard questions. We really
Yeah.
appreciate that.
And thank you. I want to thank you all for the opportunity. It's great to see both of you. And Eric, thank you for just sharing your truth with me. And that to me made my day. And it also just validates the importance of we never know the impact we have on people's lives. And just think as educators, you get the opportunity to do it over and over and over again. Every year you have students. So all those deposits you're making in this world is truly priceless. So thank you for that.